After the major success of Rust in Peace, Megadeth were in the mainstream spotlight for now, and to enter the studio again in order to top what would later become their most well-renowned album, Rust in Peace, they had to do something different, do something more unique. And at this period in time, thrash metal and metal in general was starting to decline. The early 90s was a sign that metal would actually die off almost by the end of the decade. Now, you would have some bands that would continue to put out albums, metal bands. You know, you had bands like Pantera that released stuff consistently throughout the 90s, and of course you have other bands in Europe that would continue to stay to form and wouldn't quote unquote sell out. But with Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction, I believe that Megadeth finally hit a blend that not only would please the audience that stuck through with them since Killing Is My Business, but they would also be able to expand to an even larger audience. Now, this was sort of the goal I believe that Metallica had with the Black Album. And with Countdown to Extinction, there are a lot of radio-friendly songs on this album, most notably Symphony of Destruction, which every once in a while around here may get some radio airplay. You also had Sweating Bullets, which became a mainstay on MTV back when they showed music videos, would become a mainstay on MTV for quite some time. But going through this track listing, Skin on My Teeth is a great opener to this album. It showcases the new direction that Megadeth was taking very well. It not only keeps that trademark lyricism and vocal style that Mustaine has, but also it's not as in your face with the guitar work as past work, such as Peace Sells or Rust in Peace. It was a bit of a slowdown, and simplicity was found on this album. Now, granted, there are some songs that could easily have been on earlier Megadeth albums, like Ashes in Your Mouth, for example, is a all-out, fast-paced closer song of the album, and my personal favorite from the album. But then you had songs like Foreclosure of a Dream, and This Was My Life, and Captive Honor, which showcase that not only Megadeth can play fast as lightning, but they can also slow down and have melody and have a more unique rhythm. However, Countdown to Extinction was the first album by Megadeth I had ever heard. My mother owned this album. She had it stashed somewhere, and me being curious as to what some of these albums are because she would never play them, I decided, well, you know, I'll stick this in a CD player. I'll find out what's on this album. And to be honest, when I'm 4 or 5 years old and I see this album cover of an old man levitating, screaming in what looks like a prison cell with a plate with skulls and bones on it, you know, that was kind of, it was a really, I wouldn't want to say terrifying album cover for someone that young, but there was something about that album cover, and that's kind of what made this album special to me, is that's that one scary album. That's the one album we don't really want to try to pull out and listen to. But when I finally did, I found that this album was, it was unlike anything I had ever heard up to that point. And Megadeth would begin a direction where they would eventually lose their way. And I'll highlight more of that on Euthanasia, because on Euthanasia that's present a lot more than on Countdown to Extinction. But with tracks like Foreclosure of a Dream, and This Was My Life, you had that new direction, which I feel, if you read Mustaine's autobiography, he talks about how he was pressured. Him and the band in its entirety were pressured to go towards a more mainstream feel, sort of emulating what was present at the time with the grunge scene and stuff like that. Like, you look and see some live footage of Mustaine playing live, and he's wearing flannel. And so he talks about extensively in this autobiography about him losing his way in the music business, and how the 90s, while they were the most successful part of his career, he felt that he lost his way and he actually alienated part of his classic audience. Now, Countdown to Extinction isn't the beginning of that. In fact, I disagree with a lot of people when they say that Countdown was the beginning of the end of Megadeth, so to speak. You know, it was the countdown to extinction. I believe that Euthanasia, which we'll touch on a little bit, was more of the beginning of the end. But with tracks like High Speed Dirt, Psychotron, Ashes in Your Mouth, and of course Symphony of Destruction and Sweating Bullets, two mainstays in their live set, along with Skin of My Teeth, this album is chock full of solid material. Being that it's the first Megadeth album I ever heard, I have a little bit more bias towards this album. But if I were to give it a grade, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. This is a great addition to the Megadeth catalog, and frankly, after this album, we start to get a bit of a decline, which, well, I know a lot of people will disagree with me when it comes to what I'm talking about, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. 7.5 out of 10 for me. Danny here from Metal Couch, signing off.